Hello. So I am Grant Parker. This is a PowerPoint I made to try to bring together a bunch of the issues I've been looking into, which are sort of the issues in the news, sort of not. I am going to try not so much to comment on the current audit crisis stuff, but I think you should see how it connects. I'll kind of go over this later, but kind of my whole point is that if you think of this as just a crisis suddenly, you're missing the context. A lot of the stuff is long running. I'm not going to defend Keisha Scarlett, but I will just say that I was looking into this stuff before she came in, and that if you're running stories or thinking about the district and you're thinking in terms of this specific superintendent and what she did, I just think you're missing a lot. And I'm going to try to tie a lot of things together here. I both made this to be kind of an overview, so there's going to be some stuff that I kind of shoehorned in because I think it's important. But also I'm going to try to connect everything. This is a video, PowerPoints. I'm a teacher. These are kind of my love languages, but you should be able to, if you don't want to watch the videos, you can just try to go through. I tried to leave notes and links and images that you could kind of just go through yourself, but I thought it might be nice to try to present it. Right. So depending on your familiarity with this kind of thing, this might be old news or not. This is the salary scale. This one is actually from 2022. But the reason for that is that they stopped updating it on our website. So this does match if you look up public pay. This was the last year that is in the or the Post Dispatch has a public pay thing, so it is nice that it matches up that way. But there's been another year and then another increase after that for the current year that hasn't been reported. And they don't update the website where this comes from, so it is just blank now, but you can still find a copy of this online, and I took some screenshots also of the information that used to go with it. But I would just point out, this is nearly universal. Again, maybe this is very boring for you because you've seen one of these, but if not, what you need to know is that if you're a teacher, you probably know about these. You can look up any district. I encourage you to do it. Look up salary schedule or salary scale, and you'll get something like this. They don't all have the ABC. They're slightly different, but the idea being there are columns for education and steps for years of experience, and that's how you figure out your pay. And typically, and again, there are some exceptions, but very few, you get one step. So basically, every year you would start at A for 0 years, and you'd get one step, all the way down until you get to the end, and higher levels of education have more steps. So again, sorry if you're bored, but just to make this very clear for people who aren't. A is the entry level. Each level of education has its own, so BA, MA plus 15, that's for if you don't complete a degree, but you get more experience, and then all the way up to PhD. So the more education, the more the starting pay, and then also the higher the possible pay. They give you more steps and they go higher. So on this, basically, if you have a bachelor's only and no experience, you start at 55. And then if you have a PhD and you've been teaching for 24 years, you should get $106,000, which is a lot. Not just in total terms, but a lot for any teacher in the state. And I'll go into that in a minute. Right, so if I've already lost you with being very boring, here's where it is supposed to get interesting, so please strap in. What I just explained is how most salary schedules work. Maybe you already know this, or maybe I'm going to tell you something new, but SLPS does not use the salary schedule the way other people do. But it is important to know that they are nearly universal. Florida doesn't use them because they have some weird thing where they try to pay teachers for results. It doesn't really work, so nobody's copied Florida. But otherwise, these are nearly universal. So if you're a teacher looking for a job, it's very easy to pull up the salary schedule and figure out how they work. So when we use it in a unique way, it's already a little misleading. And the way we use it, I'm going to explain. It's not a good way. It is not a beneficial to teachers way. It is a bizarre way. So the real range, so I told you, was 45 to 106. It's much smaller than that. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. So again, speaking generally, a teacher would look at a salary schedule and they'd say, well, I have 3 years of experience, so I will be on the third step. So not everybody does the ABC, some of it's just 1, 2, 3. But typically if I had 3 years, or I have 5 personally, so I would look at this and I would say A, B, C, D, E, aha, I would start here. However, you can even, it says right here, step placement, only A through C are used. So this is already important because I told you before that we have a very high possible, this is the highest rate for any teacher. You'd have to be a PhD with a lot of experience, but if you were a PhD holder with 24 years of experience and you came to SLPS, you would be expecting, if you just glanced at this, to be earning $106,000. But just this little note here says that, oh no, you have 7+ years, so you would actually just start at step C, which is $57,000, which, not a math teacher, but that's a lot lower. So already there's some bait and switch going on, which it's only going to get worse. So before you go any further, you might think, well, you still have a pretty high starting salary, and we do. This is from MNEA report, and this is districts in the state with more than 10,000 students, which we are one of, so you can fit them all on one page, good comparison group. And we are number 1 for the minimum and maximum, which is to say we have the highest starting salary and the highest possible salary out of this group of schools, and one of the highest in the state. State ranks 7 for like the bachelor's, so it moves around a little bit. But here's those numbers, so the 45 all the way up to 66. And the number of steps is to say you get raises for 12 years when you have a bachelor's. So you go from 45 up to 66 in 12 years. And this is reported to state agencies. It is on the internet. Again, people look for this when they want to get a new job. So this is data, right? That's good. But of course, no, it is not good. The stats are lies. So again, the website, which I put in the comments, it's you don't need to go to it, it's blank. It says salary schedule and then there's nothing on it. Didn't used to be the case though, and I took this screenshot because they spelled it out. I was kind of blown away when I saw that, oh, this is just a policy. You had to find the right website to see this. But how and when and how do I advance on the salary schedule? You don't go to a new step each year. I believe we are unique in that. We have this schedule, but we don't move people up it. Percentage increases is what we get instead. And they say this. So instead of moving up every year, we're going to get a raise that they say approved by the district in collaboration. So one would assume that means negotiation, but hold on there. So they even brag about this. They received an 8% increase in 2022, which was a pretty big one. A 3% increase, which is not much, the next year. And then you've probably heard the news. We got a 7%, a 5%, a 5% for the next few years, but these are guaranteed. So steps A, B, and C are used to determine experience when you get a job. Only when you get a job. At the time of hire, do not change. They put this in bold because whoever is writing this is trying to be kind of honest, and they're saying, we don't use the salary schedule the way you're expecting. It is notable that they deleted this. It is still the policy, they just don't advertise it. So this is the real salary schedule. They probably make it look prettier, but this is more honest. Again, it's still the old one, so the numbers have technically gone up. But if you'll notice, the range, so from 45,000, if you have 0 through 3 years of experience, you get this number. And if you are a PhD with 50 years teaching experience somehow, you would get this number. So it goes from 45 up to 57. And this was a couple years ago, so now it would technically be possible to break 60,000, but you'd have to be a PhD with prior experience. Again, if you get your experience at SLPS, they don't move you up. I just want to be very clear that this step placement, so 4 to 6 years of experience, B, technically I would fall into that range because I have 5 years of experience, but those 5 years are at SLPS. So when I started, I was on step A, and they're going to leave me on step A forever. And although guaranteed in the place of steps, when we get raises, so every year, I do get a raise because even though I am step A all the time, they're going to give me a percentage increase. in collaboration with the union. They guarantee it. It's been since I've been there, between 3 and 8%. 8% being the highest, 3 being more typical. But every time we get one of these, there's a headline: get bonus and pay raises in new contract. This is kind of in some ways where this started, because when I learned about this system and I started seeing news, they were saying, oh, big raises for teachers. I'm like, hold on a second, we didn't get big raises, we're getting tiny raises. And I'm going to go into that in more detail. SLPS teachers are paid poorly. These raises are guaranteed, and this news coverage, they've hacked the system so that they can get coverage that says, oh, look at what we're doing for our teachers, but they're not. This is a much worse system. I would much rather have just small, every now and then, adjustments for inflation and just a regular pay schedule. So I will just point out, these headlines bother me. And I've tried writing to people to get them to correct them, and they just kind of, most people are just like, we'll put in a little blurb, but they're still going to run the stories. So not to harp on it too much, but again, this is what people read. So this is from a Post-Dispatch story in 2022. And you'll notice that it says new teacher salary of $45,000, second highest in the state. Current starting salary is $41,000, which is 21st, and look at that, we're making improvements. But I just want to point out, for most teachers, this is starting salary is the salary. You do not move up with years of experience. And so this is one of those, this is technically true, but it doesn't make sense because it's so much different than how other teachers in other districts are paid. And at first, the people don't know this. Teachers don't know this. When teachers sign up, I didn't realize I would not be getting raises based on experience. When I signed up, I learned that later. Like, what the heck? Why am I still at the starting salary? Why are people who are starting earning more than me? Because they get paid for their prior experience in a way I don't. A teacher with 4 years experience outside the district would be on step B and making therefore more than me, even though I had more experience and it was in the district. So to get a little deeper down the rabbit hole, they're not just lying to teachers. This is taken from, I believe, the MNEA data, which I can't remember if I put a link here, but you can just search for it. They have a lovely little PDF comparing step schedules across the state. Again, because step schedules are so universal, when they compare teacher salaries, they're looking at comparing the salary scales, not just looking at what they actually pay. And so that's what you're seeing here. This is, again, with the 10,000 students, we are number one, but these are lies. Nobody can earn this. The max salary for a bachelor's was 12 steps. No, there are 3 steps, and only when you get hired. If you don't have prior experience, you start at step 1 and you never move from step 1. You earn the minimum salary, and then every year you get whatever the union and the district decide to increase it by. You will never be able to earn this. And that is important because they're throwing off the data. These other districts don't do it that way. For everybody else, these steps mean a universal thing. If I start in Blue Springs and I have a master's, I will make $44,000 for if I don't have experience, and after 18 steps, I could get all the way up to this max salary. That is real. With SLPS, it's not, but they're still comparing the data like it's apples to apples. So this is from DESI. It has a nice tool. I'll try to put it in the comments. You can also just search for it, where you can compare salaries and other things. There's more that I cut off here. I recommend screwing with it, but I put in the districts in those over 10,000. So if you'll remember from previous slide, we were number 1 starting salary, number 1 top salary, and yet we're second from the bottom in what we actually pay teachers. I know there's a lot of lines on here, but this is really just to demonstrate that everybody else is considerably higher than us. The only people who are lower is St. Joseph. And the state average is also on here, I believe, and we are below the state average. Yeah, it's Missouri. I didn't highlight it, but we are almost up to the state average, but the state average is pretty low, and we are a well-funded district, so that is weird. Another thing that I didn't really get into here, but if you look at this tool, we also have much lower experience level, and it is dropping. State average is around 12 years. We're at like 7 and going down. We have a much lower rate of higher education, master's degree or above. Most school districts, it's 50% or higher. We're at like 30% and dropping. And that is related to how we're paying people. We don't reward people for their experience or their education. And therefore, this is very predictable. And I just really think about the juxtaposition here of we pay so much. We have a high starting salary, high possible salary. Number one in this group, except not number one, almost the bottom in what we actually pay. So what this means for teachers, a lot more than the bullets, but first of all, so I'm on a committee and we're trying to talk about, not just at SLPS, but all over, making $60K starting wage for teachers, which I think is a noble goal. But I would just point out that if you look at the state averages, lots of teachers make $60,000. Not so much in SLPS, though. It is very hard. If you have a bachelor's degree, how are you going to get to $60,000? You need roughly 35% one-time raise to get there. No amount of experience is going to get you there. And we're not handing out raises like that. The raises are pretty small year on year, especially as inflation makes $60,000 a little less every year. Teachers know about salary schedules, but they will not know about SLPS's use of them. Truly, these tools, these data comparisons, I'm not sure that anybody really knows this. I mean, when the MNEA compiles that, they didn't put a little asterisk to say, just for the record, SLPS doesn't honor steps. They just list what the steps are. That's really weird and dishonest. They are throwing off data. New teachers are going to be attracted by these high salaries. When you look at who has the highest starting wage in big school districts, you're going to find SLPS. That sounds like a pretty good inducement to join up. But when you get here, you're going to find out sooner or later that you're not ever going to get a step, that you are only getting those yearly increases. And maybe for a minute, the yearly increases will seem all right, but they're really not. We get paid very little. And I didn't really put this in here, but, well, no, I did. Never mind. Next bullet, other districts with lower starting salaries will pay you more. Those other districts, once you've been with SLPS for a few years and you have a few years of experience that they are not rewarding you for, you can look at other districts and make the switch. They'll pay you for your prior experience with 1 year equals 1 step, plus you'll get new steps there. So there's a bunch of news recently about KIPP compared to St. Louis public schools as a whole, and I didn't go into that. It's a little bit of a tangent, but if you want to hear about that, and it gets into with the union stuff, that it was very poorly covered, I thought. But there was a bunch of news about how KIPP doesn't pay its teachers as well as SLPS. Not true. I would get a raise if I switched to KIPP because they would pay me for my experience. KIPP has a problem. It's a tough school, so they have low experience, so their average salary does end up being pretty low, but that's because they have inexperienced teachers. If they got SLPS teachers with a bunch of experience, those teachers would be making more at KIPP than they make at SLPS. And just as a whole, teachers feel lied to, underpaid, and will be encouraged to leave the district. If we were trying to create a system that attracts new teachers who don't know how the system works and then gets them to leave after a couple of years, this would be the system we would create. That's where we get with the perverse incentives. It's like they're trying to attract new teachers with no experience, and then they're trying to get them to leave after a couple of years. Don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I'll point out, until year 5, you pay into the pension system, but you're not vested. If you leave before year 5, you're just paying for somebody else's pension. Around year 5, if you start comparing salary schedules, is when it's like, man, I would get a raise if I went anywhere. All right, so this is where it's going to take a little bit of a turn, but I think some interesting stuff. I'm going to try to keep it brief, but again, there is way more to this. Why do we do it this way? So the state took over SLPS in 2007. Similar situation to now, low performance, bad finances. And one of the things that happened was the union agreed to freeze the step schedule. No more steps for teachers until we got our finances back in order, or at least we thought until we got our finances back in order. So that was when the steps got frozen. It also meant that the union agreement got language added allowing the district total discretion in teacher pay. That's what this little screenshot is here. Now that screenshot is from, I linked it here. In 2019, Sally Toppings, the president of the union, she was newly elected, and she sued SLPS because they were not using the salary schedule consistently. The system was supposed to be what I've described, but what they actually sued about was that some teachers were getting paid much more than they should have been, which is a weird thing for the union to sue about. But they were saying if you're going to pay these guys this much, you have to pay everybody that much. And they went to arbitration, and the district won. The union lost. But the reason for it is pretty surprising. I really encourage you to read this document. It's pretty long, but it'll give you some insight, show that I am not making this up. At least read like the arbitrator's findings. There are some shocking lines in there, but what they determined was that, yeah, the pay is unfair, but it's written into the union contract. The union knew about this. The union even has a list of people who are getting paid more than they should, and this was all agreed to. Why that language is still in the union agreement after the finances got back in order, nobody can quite say, but it is. Therefore, you can't complain about unfair pay when you write into your union agreement, the district can pay us however they want. Right. So the union. I took this screenshot is from like an HR presentation you can get on their website. They tout this all the time. The union and the district get along. They are the same creature. There's some links here that I really think are worth checking out. They're kind of a time capsule, but it led to today. So the AFT 420, I'm going to show my bias, but they are best understood as a branch of HR. Because of the way unions are funded now, they can't force people to pay dues, and the union is primarily not supported by dues. I'm not a good enough investigative reporter to find this, but they get some amount of money from the district, and it's enough to pay Ray a very good salary. This is a side note I didn't put in, but Ray's pay is based on that top 106, the PhD, written into the union bylaws, is he gets the top PhD rate plus 9% is what Ray is paid by the district. So even though a PhD teacher can't make that amount, Ray Cummings can. And they work really closely with HR. The link, if you follow this, is to a article back in 2013 about the St. Louis plan. I'm going to try not to go too deep into this right now because you might not be that interested. I think it's worth looking into. The article is called "In St. Louis, the Teachers Union Plays a Role in Getting Rid of Bad Teachers." And it is about the start of this cooperation between the union and administration in forcing out teachers. There is a whole story there that has not been covered and really should be. I will just say I have personal relations with the union. They are incredibly awful. I really think that this is kind of a sidebar, so I'm going to keep talking, go on to the next point, but somebody should look into this. They are otherworldly terrible. Ask if you want stories. So despite the headlines, there's no evidence that the union negotiates raises at all. Typically with stuff like this, the union will say, here's our request, here's what they counter offered. They don't do that. They don't announce a negotiating team. Again, it's kind of a sidebar, but when you see those headlines that say like 97% of members voted, that none of that is true. The most recent contract we weren't allowed to see. You had to come in person to a surprise Monday meeting. Probably less than 100 people total voted, most of them being union leadership. It was a terrible contract. We lost money. We lost our bonuses. We weren't allowed to see it. We still haven't actually seen the language of it. So don't believe the headlines. To get into the history a little bit, and this is a little bit before my time, but Sally Topping, I looked into this. I didn't know about this lawsuit. It got buried. But Sally Topping was an outsider. She was a lawyer and then became a teacher and then got into the union, and she tried to make some things better. She's the one who launched that lawsuit that ended up with the arbitrator saying, hey, can't sue because the union, your prior presidents knew about this and wrote it into the contract, which should have been shocking and led to some changes, and it did. When the lawsuit failed, that was 2019. This was right around the start of COVID. This didn't get covered a lot, but the arbitration agreement made the union look really bad. It said that the union was complicit in unfair wages to teachers. And so what the union did is Ray Cummings was the old guard. He was the one who was helping administration to fire teachers, bad teachers. They forced her out. They tried to vote her out, couldn't do that, and they used some, this is where it gets a little fuzzy, and I could use some proper investigative chops, because it's unclear how she got forced out. Something about union rules and executive council. They just locked her out, made Ray Cummings president. Nobody voted. I don't know that Ray Cummings has gotten a single vote to be president. He just made himself president. And he has been reinstalled and threatening people ever since. Truly, I put in the notes here, Ray Cummings threatened to beat me up, and I tell that story sometimes, and the number of times I have said, oh man, Ray Cummings threatened to beat me up, and people have gone, you too? It's really weird. Somebody should really be looking into this. It's funny because you can see the picture of him there. He's an old, small man who is chain smoking, so I didn't take it very seriously, but he really thinks of himself as a gangster, and he has paid a lot of public money to screw over teachers and lie about it. All right, so I'm going to try to tie some things together here, but big picture, we have a teacher shortage. It's not national. You will often hear in stories, national teacher shortage. Look at some districts around St. Louis. There is a national teacher shortage in the sense that there's a lot of openings for teachers, but lots of districts are full up. SLPS is not one of them. We lose teachers. Teachers resign fast after they've been here. We attract them and spit them out. We pay teachers very poorly. We don't reward experience, so obviously that's one of the reasons we have a teacher shortage. But I'm also going to pivot a little bit here. We pay administrators very well, and we have a lot of them. I mean, everybody knows that we have to right-size the district. We haven't been right-sizing our administration. We have a bloated administration, and they are paid very well. I'll show that in the next slide. So when the budget got big, because our budget, we're now talking about the deficit, but don't forget that we had massive surpluses for a while. That cash went to administrators and consultants and who knows where. You heard in the news about teacher raises, but you didn't hear about ballooning administrator pay and all of the consultants that were hired, not just by the Keisha Scarlett. We have been hiring lots of consultants. Again, I'm not a proper investigative reporter, so I'm hoping the audit and stuff finds some of this, but man, have we hired a lot of consultants. Like, I've been to a lot of meetings with a lot of consultants, and it's like, what are they paying this guy to show us how to make a poster to improve our teaching? And it's hundreds of thousands of dollars is the answer, and that was before the current scandal, which is one of the reasons I'm worried that people are losing the context and looking at, oh, Keisha Scarlett hired all these people. So did Adams, so did Williams. That's what we did. And if you only understand the crisis in light of what's going on with the current administration instead of historically, I think you're missing a lot. Yeah, the way SLPS is spending is not tethered to SLPS's real issues, which is to say we're spending a lot of money not on the things we should be spending money on. Why aren't we addressing the teacher shortage? So this is from that same DESI tool, just to really illustrate. So this only goes up to 2023, which is, before Keisha's time, basically. We should be getting new data, I believe, in November. But if you'll notice, so the blue line here, this is teacher salary. The Missouri line is the blue line. Ours is the yellow. We haven't quite made it to state average, but we're getting closer, although we'll see. Looks like the average is probably going up, so I'll be interested to see what the new data looks like. We might just be skimming right along underneath the average. Administrator pay, though, opposite story. We were under, but then budgets got big and our administrator pay has exploded. We are now above the state average in a healthy way. We're actually, as far as I can tell, above the national average, which is pretty impressive for Missouri schools, which are not well paid overall. You can also see some of the other data they have here. For example, the average years of experience in Missouri, 12.6. Average in SLPS, 7.6. That's down from 8.2 the year prior. Our education level is low. Yeah, people should be talking about this. So this is from a HR presentation, again, off SLPS's website. Teaching staff vacancies here, 190. Non-teaching, 200. This was the most recent that they gave a presentation. Total vacancies, almost 400. Of those, administrators make up 2. I bet they've hired them by now. Looking back historically, the highest it was ever was 3. The last 2 times before that, it was 0. They were full up on administrators. Why are they paying administrators so much when we have no problem retaining administrators? So here's another little swerve, but again, I'm leaving a lot of stuff out of this, so I just wanted to bring up the administration is super duper unpopular. So we pay administrators a lot and consultants a lot, but if you ask teachers about the administration, they're overwhelmingly going to be negative. So this is from Panorama, which was, we had a giant contract. You want to talk about public spending? I think last time I checked, it was $150,000 or something just to run a survey. Don't know why they couldn't do a Google form. But they were surveying about a lot of different stuff, but this is just a snapshot of one. So I worked at Metro. I had to FOIA this. Typically, they don't release these. They were acting like this was the property of HR, but I looked into FOIA law. It's a public document, so I requested it. They gave it to me. I don't think it made me popular. And I actually am not sure that we do this anymore, and I wonder if maybe when they learned that teachers could get access, they're like, okay, we're not doing this. There's actually a deeper story here. I think they use this to fire people because, frankly, at my school, there were 3 teachers who gave negative reviews about their own principal, and all 3 of those were forcibly transferred out. So again, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but there are legs that I am not exploring here. I just want to point out, administration is super unpopular. We're paying these people tons of money. There's way too many of them. And if you ask teachers, does the administration help you? The answer is overwhelmingly no. It is negative. It is retaliatory. You cannot get what you want. The policies are not fair. And I would just, again, I'm getting into the tangent zone, but Ron Spivey, if you haven't looked into, I put a link to the story in my comments. We paid $6 million public money to an SLPS employee who was harassed out of his position. And the reason we paid him so much was because it's very hard to sue your boss in Missouri. We have terrible labor laws, but when he finally got before a judge, it took years. When they looked at it, they said, oh my, this is awful. Like, this was systematic. This wasn't one bad principle. This was a system that punished and did not care about the rights of its workers. And they gave that $6 million judgment to get the district to introspect, to be like, we need to change some things. As far as I can tell, they didn't. They paid administrators more, hired more of them, and have been punishing teachers just as much. So again, if this seems like a swerve, I just want to point out this is part of a pattern of rewarding people at the top and punishing the people who actually are doing the work. The school teachers and staff, the ones who they can't hire, get paid poorly and treated poorly. I guess I'll keep this one very short. I was going to do something with this and kind of didn't, but I would just point out this is from the MNEA again, and we have a high tax levy, high assessed value. We're spending all this money, and we're lying about our stats here. These steps are all fake. This is used for comparison between districts, and it is just wrong. We don't pay people the way we say. Even the certified staff, that's not real. That's how many we should have. That is not the number we employ because we can't hire enough teachers. One of our most recent schemes was to get teachers from the Philippines and give them like a work visa, which I truly worry about, not because I have a problem with Filipinos, but because I worry giving HR the ability to deport teachers they don't like. Ugh, terrifying. So a lot of legs here. I probably should have deleted this slide though. All right, if you made it this far, congratulations. I would just point out there's a lot to this. There's stuff that I did not add that I kind of want to go back and add, but just recording this, I'm realizing I'm going close to 40 minutes. I was going to try to keep it 15. But it's a lot of branches. There's a lot more to all of this. This is meant to be a primer, not a report, not an investigation. I avoided naming administrators responsible because from my perspective, this is systematic. If anybody who I send this to is like a reporter, like, I want to hear your story, trust me, it's there, and it is crazy what people will do behind closed doors when they think they're unaccountable. But I am really worried because as a worker at SLPS who has had so much trouble with administration, reading the news and hearing them come down hard on an outsider from Seattle and her cadre of, I don't know, Seattleites, it just strikes me as kind of insulting to teachers who have been seeing problems for years and are like, that's not the corruption. Even if they are corrupt, they were corrupt and drawn to a corrupt system. There is so much wrong with this system that even if everything they say about Keisha Scarlett is correct and she was terrible and spent money willy-nilly and abusive to people, that's the SLPS way. So I encourage you to ask me more. There's so much that I left out that I would love to drone on about. Just point out, again, getting into the news coverage, there's this line that's been going around that says $32 million in like staff and teacher raises. That's a lie. Their own estimates were that the increases, 3 years of them, would cost $24 million over those 3 years. And then suddenly they pulled out $32 million in raises. Those aren't going to teachers and staff. Who are they going to? Must be administrators, but nobody's putting that together. They're just running these things that say that HR says it's spending $32 million on raises, and so it gets into the news that way, and it drives me kind of crazy. There's a lot to all of this. Sorry to have droned on so long. I made this originally for one group of people, and then I decided I was going to send it out to a bunch, so I tried to add some stuff and make it kind of I don't know, broader than I originally thought. So if any of this seemed really boring, but one part grabbed your attention, I encourage you, contact me, look into it. Some of the people I'm sending this to are like investigative people. I am a English and history teacher. I'm not a proper investigative journalist. I just have some free time and really don't like what I'm seeing. So I would really encourage people to ask me for stories, offer help. This is a bigger story than it is being presented as.